We are really lucky to have so many athletes joining us tonight. We're going to introduce them here in just a little bit, but before we get started, I want to welcome Jesse Anthony, who has kind of put this together tonight. He's been a big part of helping a lot of these athletes in their journey as they all head around the world racing their bikes. But Jesse, if you could just talk a little bit about what we're doing here tonight. You're working with the MudFund. Sort of describe to us what the MudFund is, what you guys do, and what it's all about.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. First of all, thanks to everyone for being here. This is a really great crew we have, and I'm excited for this conversation. The MudFund is a fundraising branch of the USA Cycling Foundation, and it supports specifically our cyclocross program. So the cyclocross program and the MudFund were kind of reinvigorated about 3 years ago with when the MudFund joined USA Cycling, and it raises money to allow for more opportunities for these athletes to kind of progress through their journey and into the next level from wherever they're at. So primarily we focus on high-level international racing experiences, but also training camps on occasion when those can happen, and other support mechanisms like direct athlete support, which is kind of like auxiliary coaching for cyclists and support that they might not receive from their normal teams and coaches. But the important thing about a program like this and all of USA Cycling's development and national team programs is helping these athletes get from the development teams that they're on or the level of racing that they're competing in to the next level and onto professional teams where they can pursue professional careers. And that takes a lot of resources. As you kind of move up in the sport, every incremental gain takes significantly more resources than the gain before it. And that's where we at USA Cycling come in raising money and support for these athletes to provide opportunities, again, to kind of take them to the next level.
I want to ask about sort of how the MudFund impacted you and where the MudFund came in your journey on your way to being a professional, because I think it fills this very important gap in cyclocross where you go from a collegiate rider or a junior rider on your way to the professionals, but there's a big gap in between. So when did sort of USA Cycling come into your professional career?
So I was really picked up and supported by USA Cycling as a U23 rider. I had some good rides in the United States, and they saw the opportunity in me to take me over to race in Europe. And so I started with just doing a few trips every year. I do the November and then the December trip. And then it was, I think the greatest support that they gave me was after I won nationals, actually as an elite, they took me over and gave me the opportunity to race that entire December block, as well as stay through to Worlds and have an opportunity to get some really great training in Spain prior to Worlds. And they really took me from being a homegrown grassroots team, part of a team like that, and brought it to a world-class cycling stage where I really could just focus on my riding above all else. Honestly, so the first time I went over as a U23, what I remember was I was mixing my recovery bottles before the race. And the Soigneur came over and they're like, "What are you doing? We have this entire cooler filled with recovery bottles. You don't have to worry about any of this." And so honestly, it was the little things like that, the recovery bottles, the not having to worry about all the noise around racing and being able to focus on getting to the line and performing.
Definitely. My first block was when I was a second-year junior, and I went to Worlds in Denmark. And we did, our first race was in Hoogerheide. So that was my first ever World Cup race for cyclocross, and it was honestly just super eye-opening. I mean, racing with the elite women for the first time, like it was kind of a whole different level, and it was quite the shock, but it was really fun as well. And I think a really good learning experience, like definitely just seeing everything for the first time, how it works in Europe, what the level of competition is like, and all the racing over there. So I think it was definitely really eye-opening.
Yeah, it was super great. My first trip, road and cross. It was definitely different going over there and having so much support. I had never gotten a massage before, and my first trip for Cross Worlds, I got a massage the first day, and I was like, "Wow, this is great. This is great." But yeah, I think like it's like all the support. It's really awesome, like what USA can do, and just like how much pressure it takes off of the athletes just to focus on performing and focus on what we need to do our best.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my first trip to Europe, my first World Cup was Namur, and I jumped in there jet lagged as heck and racing with the elite women. It was pretty wild, but I mean, all the other junior women or under 23 women understand that they didn't have a separate junior category over there. So when you're 16 years old, you're racing with the fastest women in the world. So the first few races are definitely a big jump, but once you find your footing and feel comfortable, things tend to come more natural.
You are also a collegiate racer, UVM, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Tell me about your decision to try, that balance. Obviously, you knew you had a future in the sport, but wanted to race collegiately. Tell me about that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've always kind of heard some fun stories from collegiate cycling, all the races, and I really wanted to experience it and be a part of it. UVM it's a pretty big team, and it's one of the it's very popular at the school, so it's had a lot of history, and definitely wanted to make that part of my career for cycling. And it's also pretty nice just to have as an outlet to do some races with not a whole lot of stress towards them, and just enjoy racing for what it is and enjoy all the people who come out to the events.
I'm at college right now, so the Wi-Fi is not amazing.
Yeah, the constant battle of collegiate Wi-Fi. So tell us about your college career. Where do you go to school? What are you studying?
So I am going to school at Marian University, and I am studying a dual major degree in mechanical engineering and chemistry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about racing at Marian. I mean, this is a premier collegiate program in the U.S. Is that part of what took you to Marian?
Yeah, definitely a part of the cycling team brought me to Marian, but honestly, I really came here to get the degree. They have a 5-year program, and they offer an engineering degree with Purdue. So that was a really big step for me to come here. But the collegiate scenery and like having everybody on the team, it's a really amazing thing to have people to train with every single day, and athletes just as motivated as me to like go to the gym 3 days a week and things like that. So it's very great here.
I'm going to start with your advice for riders that go over, because you had a chance to go over as a junior rider, sort of graduate through the ranks. For a young rider, they got their first trip going to Europe. I mean, for whether it's an ODA trip or a camp, what's your advice? What do you tell them the first time they go over?
I think the biggest thing, there's like two big things to keep in mind and they're kind of on the opposite sides of the spectrum as far as positivity. But the first thing is just to realize, like, these guys, there's way more depth over here. Even if you're like way ahead in the national championships at home or something like that, you're still up against, there's 15 guys who are at your ability level, if not more. And so you kind of have to keep that in mind of like, you're not just going to walk away with these races, or you're not going to be in a position to, just to be proficient at first. And that's okay. But at the end of the spectrum, I think that we as American cyclocross racers tend to hype these Europeans up a lot and kind of put them on a pedestal like we'll never get to that point. And we kind of, at some point, had to realize we're all still bike racers. We're all still people. Like these guys still go home, they take care of their dog every night, eat dinner with their families, and head back to the bike race again the next day. They're no different than us. It's just they live in a country that's a little bit more cultural to race bikes. So we have to make a little ground up there, but that's just like the two things to remember, I guess.
Jesse, anything from you?
Yeah, I really love hearing from the athletes and their stories. It's really cool. It's really an honor to be able to work with this group, and this is just a sample of the the young cyclocross athletes that we have coming up in the US. And Brad, I think you talked about so many great topics, from school to, expectations in Europe, planning and setting goals, and what the support means. We covered so many cool topics that are, again, just a sample of what goes into this sport. So these athletes all have great journeys that they're on. Some of them only a few years, and some of them have been on their journeys for a decade or more, even at this young age, which is really cool. But to see all the development teams that they came through, and the coaches and support systems that they've come through in the US, that's really awesome to see. Clubs like BJC that Maddie came through, and the CX Harris Devo that Andrew's on, and all these athletes were really well supported as juniors. So it's really cool to see that continuing to grow in the US, and to develop these athletes that are leading the sport here. And it's just such an honor to work with them, and it's good to hear that their stress levels go down when they come on our trips, because my stress levels go up. But that's the point. And I talk to people about that all the time. Like, I'm working, long days when we're over in Europe. But it's, I know how much that support means when they can wake up in the morning, have their breakfast, get in the van, get to the race, get on their bike that's clean and ready, do their warm up, race, come home, have all the food prepared. All that stuff makes a huge difference. And it's an honor to be able to do that. And we have a huge and very hardworking support staff, both in the US and in Europe too. So
I think one thing we heard from all the athletes today was how important these trips are in their development and continuing their advancement in the sport. This truly is the future of American cyclocross racing on this call right now. I mean, these are the riders that are going to be representing the United States in our Elite World Championships. For people that want to help send these riders over to Europe to make sure that this program allows riders to keep going to Europe, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys and help out with the MudFund?
Yeah, well, they can always reach out to me directly. They can find me through the USA Cycling website, or go to the USA Cycling Foundation website and donate to the MudFund, which again supports the cyclocross program. Lauren kindly put a link to that in the chat here. Yeah, I mean, like we talked about a little bit, this support is really important for getting these athletes from where they're at to the next level. And while the increment can seem small of going from the US to Europe, it's like, well, that's the next step. It takes massive amounts of resources. And that's why we do fundraise with the MudFund all year, especially a lot during the cyclocross season. And we ask people to step up and to support these athletes and to support us in helping them get to the World Championship podiums and beyond.